Hi everyone, it's been a while, so how have you been? I've been quite busy at work with all the robotics stuff that we've been doing. It's now more or less up and running, which is great, so expect more videos with, well, first of all, just the kind of building, I suppose, in general, because the layout hasn't been fully finalized yet, but we're getting some robots now in, and at some point we'll start to write some custom code to run on it, on them. That would be ideal. The FXGL book is ready and should be out quite soon, I would have thought. So there will be an announcement anyway, so don't worry too much about that. Right, so in this video, as my holidays are coming to an end, I thought I would recap everything that I've learned during the holiday. This time it was Mandarin Chinese. I've always been sort of focusing on different languages, trying to get a general idea of how they work, but this one specifically I found quite interesting. Plus, I made some new friends who've been helping me learn the language, which is always fun. And specifically, I'll try and get three major things out, three sort of sections or key points, which are going to be the differences between English and Chinese. If you're moving from one language to another, specifically English, then this may be helpful. And it's mainly sort of to reinforce everything that I've learned so far, so that next time, if I need to come back to this language and continue learning, hopefully it'll be easier for me to pick up, possibly during my next holidays. And just a general disclaimer, I think everything that I've covered so far is accurate. And, I've been talking to my friends who are native Chinese speakers, so hopefully everything in this video is also accurate. If not, feel free to flag it up. And also, if you're really interested in learning, then you might want to do your own research as well. Right, so on that note, let's talk about differences between English and Chinese. Specifically, I'll focus on tones, pronunciation, and the writing and reading systems, because all of these things are quite different. And number one is tones, something that we don't necessarily have in English. Well, we do have something, it's just we don't use tones in exactly the same way. Our intonation kind of spans across the entire sentence almost. And as we finish our sentences, we tend to kind of, our speech just fades away into nothingness. But if it's a question, then we raise our voice or pitch or something like that, right? Because right, really? Because we're asking a question, so I guess we're trying to get attention so that the other person replies to our question. Whereas with statements, it's like we're sending we're going towards the full stop. So there's nothing to say there. Our pitch goes down, I think, to indicate presumably that the sentence has finished, so that we can begin a new sentence. But with tones, right, so we've got in Mandarin Chinese there are 4 tones plus the 5th way of pronouncing a syllable. So let's take a look at the word, at something in English. Let's go with computer, because I'm staring at one. Computer is a word that has 3 syllables, right? Computer. And in English, there's only one syllable that can be stressed. In this case, it's this one, right? It's let's go with that. It's computer. It's not computer, and it's not computer. I mean, you can stress them, but it doesn't sound right. So from that perspective, from a software development perspective, I guess, each syllable can have a flag that is true or false, stressed or not stressed. And that's kind of it. And there's only one syllable that's ever stressed. You can't have 2. And similarly, you can't have 0, I guess. But in Chinese, that's different. In Chinese, you take any syllable. Let's go with something simple like I, which is 我. And for that syllable, you have 5 different ways of saying it. So it's not just a Boolean flag anymore. It's like an enumeration, some predefined values. And the tones are actually very well defined. They're not absolute values of pitch, they're relative. So for each person, tones are going to be different. And so you basically find one of the tones and then use that as a reference point for other tones. Tone 1 is the sort of high pitch. I think all of them are defined in terms of pitch. I was trying to kind of look at them from the length point of view, because in reference pronunciation, the 3rd tone is longest, the 4th tone is shortest, but that doesn't work in real speech, kind of like in real life communication, because people tend to talk quite fast, meaning all tones are kind of mushed all together. The only thing you can use as a differentiating kind of point, I think, is pitch, because that's the only thing we have at this point. And in which case we can go 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then toneless is usually written as 0. So 1 is high, 2 is rising, 3 is low, and this is falling. And you can see a nice symmetry, right? So you have one high tone, one low tone, one rising tone, the other is a falling tone. So if you take a common syllable like MA, so the 2 letters, ma, then you end up with going from 1 to 4. High is ma, 2 is rising ma, low is kind of, it's a low pitch, ma, and 4 is falling, so ma. And then neutral has, I don't know too much about that neutral toneless thing because I don't see it often. It's usually like particles, like question particles, some other speech particles. The word that I know it exists in is the question word what, which is 什么, and that ma is toneless. So an example here would be this. 神 is second tone, rising one, 什么. But that's kind of it. It has, for every syllable in Chinese, specifically Mandarin, because there are different variations of Chinese, you have 5 different ways of pronouncing it, whereas in English you have just yes or no kind of thing, stress, not stress. Now imagine if you start combining these syllables with different tones, with other syllables which can also be different tones. It's not like there's only one syllable that's pronounced in different ways, like in English, because you can only have one stressed syllable. In Chinese, every syllable has a way of pronouncing it. So separately pronouncing, it's fine. And by the way, don't copy me. My pronunciation is way off the target and my tones are not there yet. So if you want to copy someone, then copy a native speaker. So when you have multiple characters combined to form words, that's where it gets interesting, because you now have different combinations of tones, right? It could be 1 1 1 2 1 3 1 4 1 0 2 1 2 2 2 3 2 4 2 0 and so on. The only combination I can't think of is when it starts with a 0. I don't think it can start with a 0, or at least I've never seen a word in my 10 weeks. I have never seen a word that would start with a 0 that would have 2 characters at least. So that may or may not exist, I don't know. But the other combinations definitely exist. Even in the simplest sentence that you can make, like hello, where are you from? You will have to use these tones. So it's not a matter of using or not using, because you will be using it. It's just part of the language. So if you're going to learn Chinese, you will need to learn tones possibly before anything else. Because if you miss a tone, as in if you say it in a different way than what it should be, then you're basically saying a different word. Whereas in English, that doesn't matter how you say computer. You can say it in different ways in terms of pitch, high, low, rising, falling. It's still computer. You're just saying it in an interesting way. Whereas in Chinese, that completely changes the meaning of the word and therefore the meaning of the sentence. And even from kind of just understanding point of view, when people speak, you have to be able to differentiate the tones, which I can't right now, not yet anyway. And without that, you're kind of guessing like which word it is. Is it ma? Is it ma? And you know, and it's just a lot of fun actually, because you know we don't have this kind of thing in English, so we don't get kind of interesting meanings and interesting situations where meanings completely change based on how you say things. One of the things that I've been struggling with so far was actually, let me write it down first so you can see. It's country, which is America, 美国, and this. No, not this one. This is actually something that I've seen from a textbook. So on the left-hand side, and they're both this. It's just the tones that are different. So on the left-hand side, it's 美国, I think. on the right-hand side, it's 美国. And on the left-hand side, it's America, as in country. And on the right-hand side, it means like without or no fruit. So it becomes quite interesting if you start making sentences with these words. Because it could easily be like 美国人, or 美国人. In one case, it's supposed to be a person from America, as in American, and in another case, it's supposed to be a person without fruit. So it's just all of fun. I want to say puns. I guess these are puns, right? In Chinese, how do they work? I don't know. But it's a lot of fun as a learner. Right, so these are tones. I won't go any further with this because, well, first of all, I need to know that what I'm saying is correct, so we'll come back to it later. Now, the second thing, second section, as it were, is pronunciation. Most of the sounds, the phonetics in Chinese, phonetics of characters, are written in what's known as pinyin, and that is basically using English letters, most of them, and well, like this, I guess. So these are written in English letters, and these are used to define the sounds of the characters. And it also works the other way. If you know what a character sounds like, you can also input that character with your keyboard. So like this. Because I know what I sounds like in Chinese, 我, which is W and O, I can type that, and the keyboard will give me an option to pick from one of the characters. Now, presumably all these characters have the same pronunciation but different tones, which is why it's giving me several options, because I haven't put the tone in. I don't think you can do that. So you just pick one that you wanted, which is a fun way, again, typing something, because you're not necessarily using letters, kind of. You're typing in like characters, but you can't, type characters. You have to type letters in and then map through sound. You map them to characters. And right, so going back to the pronunciation thing, because these are written in English letters, they kind of sound like English letters, and in most cases they are actually passable. So if you say it just like you would say an English word, it would still kind of work for most cases. There are some cases, specifically these ones, that most of English speakers, and me included, have struggled with quite a lot, because these are not sounds that we have in English, right? We have something similar, but not exactly that. And these sounds are formed by moving the tongue, the tip of your tongue, below the bottom row of teeth, which we almost never do in English. I don't think we ever do that. Our tongue tip doesn't go that low, I don't think. And then the middle part of your tongue needs to go up, so that the tongue looks like this. It points downwards. And that's how you get these J, Q, and X sounds, which actually sound something like ji, qi, xi. And they are an equivalent, or their counterparts of z, z, si, which are in turn counterparts of ZH, CH, and SH. Now, the great thing about these triads of sounds is that if you know one of them, if you know how to say one of them, the tongue position doesn't change, I think. All you're changing is how you're exhaling, or how you're kind of forcing the air out of your mouth. So you have the upper sounds. So these are upper sounds, meaning that your tongue needs to point upwards. These are middle. I call them middle because I think the tongue just stays somewhere in the center. And this is lower. So going from upper, you go zhi, zhi, shi, to middle, zi, zi, si, and then you go ji, qi, xi. And it just works because these are kind of exactly the same sounds, I want to say, in terms of there's some commonality between them that I can't quite describe. But in most cases, these will be grouped like this. And I think there is a reason for that. So apart from these sounds, the others are quite similar to English. There are still differences though. Like if you start examining them in detail, there are things like aspirated, non-aspirated, voiced, voiced and voiceless. So there's a lot of kind of tiny details that need to be looked at. That I'm yet to cover that ground. So that, I think, gives a general idea of how pronunciation works. I guess these are all kind of consonants. So in terms of vowels, there are also differences, like the R and O, A, O. These are kind of similar. There's E, which is like an English E. The Chinese E is different because it's not pronounced like E, it's more like kind of thing. So, for example, if you had this word, in English we'll just say hen. In Chinese, it's more like hun, or if you add the tone, most commonly it's the third tone, hen, like this one, which is added to when you're adding an adjective to a noun. When you're describing a noun with an adjective. Yeah. So yeah, vowels are kind of different as well. And just to add complexity, the same vowel can also sound slightly different depending on what surrounds it. Because certain sounds need to come from different areas of your mouth, and after that, if you're moving to a particular vowel, then it's kind of almost like a given that that vowel is going to sound different. Right, I think that's enough on the pronunciation side of things. Writing and reading. Now, that's different because there is no alphabet, at least not in the sense that we use in English, because we have a predefined set of characters that map to sounds, right? If it's an A, take any word where there is an A in it, it will sound like an A, well, more or less. It may sound slightly different, like in the word car, it's A. In the word cat, it's like a cat. But it's kind of same, right? Whereas in Chinese, if you look at a character, and if you find a similar character in a different character, that's when they get transformed to radicals, or radicals form characters, something like that. The same radical may sound different, is the key. Like similar looking characters are not going to sound similar. And by looking at a character, if you've never heard its sound before, then there's very little you can extract from the character itself. There are some characters that carry the phonetic component, but even then, you're just guessing, because you've simply narrowed down the pool of possible sounds, but you still don't know what the sound is, and you still don't know what the tone is. And some characters are simply not possible to use to even guess the sound of. So that's how Chinese differs from English. By looking at a character, you don't know what it sounds like, generally speaking. So you might actually be able to read Chinese from kind of meaning point of view and understand what it says, but it's also possible at the same time not be able to say any of that because you don't know the sounds. And in order to type something, like we already discussed, you need to know the sounds. And that's how you type characters. So if you are able to type them, you're kind of almost there in terms of speaking as well, because you're supposed to say that. But typing, I found that it's much easier to type because you don't need to input the tones. And if you have good visual memory, then you should be fine. There are about, actually I don't know how many characters there are in total. My friends have tried one of the free online tests that kind of approximate the number that you know of characters. And they usually get a value between 6,000 and 7,000. And these are native Chinese speakers. So I guess that's kind of a lot if you want to be able to, if you want to be fluent in Chinese. Though they do tell me that you don't actually need to know that many to be able to just get by. Probably around 1,000 would be like comfortable-ish. There are different tests. I think the official test requires you to know something like 500 for the first level. These are called HSK tests, and they've been updated just recently. So I think the version 3 of the test for the very first beginner level requires you to know about 500. And it's interesting how they define beginner. Like at 500 characters, you're able to just start learning the Chinese language, which is pretty cool. Like even to be able to learn, you need to learn like before that. But it's a lot of fun. And hopefully I'll get some more time to properly focus on these things, because sentence structures are great. Like for questions, you don't need to flip the word order like we do in English, right? Because if you're asking a question in English, you have to add do or does, and then you move the subject kind of to the right, and you end up with like do you rather than you do. Whereas in Chinese, it just remains the same. Like, do you speak English, right? Because we flip that. Whereas in Chinese, it's kind of you speak English. See, you don't need to flip the word order, which is quite nice. Right, on that note, I'm going to stop here. And if you're interested, feel free to drop me an email with some new words for me to learn. And until the next video then, bye-bye.